What do you think happens when you die in a review? It's time to find out. Let's talk about Black Phone 2.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are back now with the Storm Podcast. So, today we're going to be discussing or debating Black Phone 2. But before we get into that, you already know what time it is movie recommendation time. So, guys, best recent thing that we've seen.
I'm gonna go with Gen V. I think I recommended it a few weeks back, but I'd only seen like maybe like one episode or so. But now I'm actually fully caught up, and there's one more episode that I need to watch, which is the finale. I can't think of like many, and I know people like mention things like The Walking Dead, the one with Negan and the other woman in there, but I really can't think of like many spin-off shows that are on par with the main series, really and truthfully. Normally when it gets to the spin-off shows.
Ken just mentioned Frasier, spin-off show that's superior to the original. But that's because I
Is
want
it
to mention Frasier every time.
is it not like a revisit of the original Fraser like years ago?
No, it's so Cheers was in the 80s, and that was about this bar in, is it Chicago, I think? And Frasier was a supporting character in that. And that ran for like 12 seasons or something. And then when that was over, they spun it off, where Frasier moves to a different city, starts a new life. And that then ran for 11 seasons. So it's a different show. It's a spin-off that's completely different in premise and style from the original. But I'm just saying, I just want to mention Frasier every time I can, and it's one of the examples where the spin-off was better than the original.
Fair enough. And it's actually funny that I know of Fraser, but I don't know of the original. So that's testament to that. But I mean, I think in Genevieve's case, I will say it's predictable, and you can kind of see where it's going with this plot a million miles away, and I kind of predicted it quite early on, like how it was going to play out. But it's really just like satisfying to watch. It's as outlandish as the original Boys is. I feel like the characters and the character chemistry in this is like really really good as well. I'm not gonna like be blasphemous and put it on the levels of Hogwarts, but just this idea of a university for superpowered people, and a lot of the people there have like absolutely ridiculous powers and shouldn't be there. It's like, what would university be like in the normal world? But people have powers, and you kind of just see like how ridiculous some of the stuff that goes on. It kind of makes me want to be part of that world a little bit, even though some of the stuff is a little bit wild. But just kind of overall, like the characters, the chemistry, the sort of the action, and again, like just kind of like the story. It's just it's simple, it's predictable, but it's interesting and it's engaging, and they do a good job of like mixing the characters from the main series of the boys with Gen V to really make it feel like one continuous universe as well, which is really good.
Yeah, I dropped out of The Boys second season, something like that. Just didn't like its style, didn't like its tone. It's interesting how Gen V kind of like how it's got a successful spin-off. And would you say it's different in tone from the original, or like sufficiently different that somebody who didn't like the tone of the original might like this one?
It's definitely less
Asking,
grotesque.
I'm asking
I
for a
mean, there's
friend.
still, yeah. I mean, I think you say it's less grotesque, but I still think that there's like elements of it
Yeah, there's
that
definitely
are
elements, but it's
still
not.
that it's still in the same vein. It's in the same ballpark. So I don't think the tone's too drastically different.
When's the last time you watched The Boys? Because I think, because obviously you've seen it quite a while ago, like The Boys was like OD craze. Like, I do get what you're saying. Like, the
But
Gen
have
V
you seen
is.
have you seen some of the new stuff that happens in the new episodes? So
Yeah.
have you seen the new episodes? It's like
Yeah, yeah.
for spoiler, Daniel, there's this fresher where he gets handed around the fat boys, and they can basically kind of do whatever they want with this person. And I can't remember his powers, but basically he kind of like goes into someone the wrong way, basically, and is in there, and then kind of gets shitted out, and then passed on to the next person. Pretty much. That's the
Okay.
kind of stuff that you're getting in there. So yeah, it's still kind of
But
grotesque.
is that just shock? Is that just shock value, or is that like actual like character
That's
stuff?
actually, do you know what I think it is? Is they kind of just like sprinkle that in the background just to like keep it, just to like have that familiarity to it. But I actually don't think like the main story and like the main plot lines doesn't really like carry too much of that. It's just a lot of the stuff that kind of happens in the background, or like some of the like additional side characters that may pop up here and there. But it's not like a common feature of the show.
Okay.
Me, I would say I've been indulging in a few things. But the one which has stood out is The Morning Show, a drama series based on American morning television, and just kind of just dives into the lives of obviously individuals that work there, and then you've got their own storyline. I watched it quite a long time ago, and then I stopped, and then now I'm back on it again. So yeah, so far so good. There's not really much to say on it. Is obviously there is a storyline, like a main storyline, which revolves around everyone, but they do have their own individual stories and their own individual battles when it comes to working in television. Like you've got a black journalists in there that's trying to break into a bigger role, and obviously the challenges that come with that. You've got this whole when someone that's higher on the hierarchy chain, like a CEO, for example, messing around with their employee. I forgot why that's not allowed, but I forgot the term that's given for it. But of course, there's a situation around that, which leads to unfortunately one of the employees' death. There's different stories, and at times it is funny, times it is serious. Say it's got a good blend of the two, of a comedic tone as well as a serious tone, which is why I'm gravitating to it.
So I watched The Legend of Suriyothai, which is a 2001 Thai historical epic. Suriyothai was a queen of Siam, which is kind of the precursor to modern day Thailand in the 1500s. And the basic story of it is that Burma invades from the north, and there's a struggle for the Siamese throne, and whoever wins that will push back against the Burmese invaders. And Suriyothai is from one of the factions that struggles for that throne. It basically follows her life from the beginning when she's like this young princess who knows nothing, is not taken serious by anybody, and then she kind of learns the ropes of feudalism and power and politics through this power struggle, and then finally becomes queen and faces down the Burmese army. This is a real historical event, and this, for about 20 years, this was the most expensive and most successful film made in Thailand, until another movie took its place. And this was basically the pet project of the queen at the time, the queen of Thailand, who basically said, my people should know their history. And that's why this movie was made. And the original version of this was a 9-hour monstrosity that got cut down to 2.5 hours in the DVD version, which is what I saw. And it had access to all the real locations, so all these palaces and fortresses and all these places where history happened obviously still exist, and they are essentially the property of the royal family in Thailand. And so they gave access to the film crew to film in the real locations, and that gives it a sense of authenticity that's really interesting to watch. And like whenever they needed a couple hundred background actors for some battle scenes, they just called up the Thai army, just said, hey, send us 500 guys to play soldiers. So it's kind of it's got this completely crazy background story, and it's kind of incomprehensible if you don't know Thai history, which I didn't. But it's really interesting to see how like somebody else approaches like a historical drama, and this is Thai history as told by Thai filmmakers and all of that, right? So it's interesting on that level. It's a little bit hard to watch, it's a little bit long, but it's really, really interesting if you like historical movies.
Cool. Well, it looks like it's time for the main event. Black Phone 2. Danny G, may you please give us your wonderful synopsises.
All right, so Black Phone 2 is a horror movie that picks up from 2021's The Black Phone, where the survivors of the first movie kind of start getting these psychic visions. So specifically, the sister of Finn, who was kidnapped by the grabber, the serial killer, he receives psychic visions that indicate a mystery surrounding surrounding the grabber, surrounding their mother, who they believe committed suicide a few years earlier, and that puts them on a path that leads them to this summer camp where all of these stories kind of converge, and they uncover kind of the history of their family and of the grabber, and it unfolds from there. So what did we think of Black Phone 2?
I liked it, but at the same time, I was wondering why did it need a second movie? I rationalized it to the fact that it did have a supernatural twist, even though it was grounded in real life trauma. It still had that supernatural twist to it in terms of like the mystery behind the black phone. So I understood how and why they could make another film out of it, because it was the way that the film ended, there was still mystery around the black phone. But at the same time, I was like, the film still could have just ended the way that it ended without an addition, because with the addition, Like it definitely did expand it, but then it kind of made it a generic supernatural type of horror film, which I didn't want. But I still enjoyed it. Don't get twisted. I thought it was fun. I had a fun time. It wasn't bad. It wasn't great, but it was a good time at the cinema. I had a good time at the cinema. But I was just throughout the film, I was just wondering, did they need to make a second film? I don't think they needed to, but hey man, I'm not gonna complain. The film was good. I enjoyed the actor's name, even though you don't see him. Ethan
Ethan
Hawke,
Hawke.
yeah. Yep. So I, even though you don't see him, I do enjoy his performance, and like just his voice just feels so sinister. So yeah, I did enjoy that, and I enjoyed it. I had a good time. But like just throughout the film, I was just wondering. I just said to myself, they didn't need to make a second film though. But I enjoyed it.
I think I'm a little bit opposite because I kind of went in there with like the same idea as to like, do we need a sequel from the first movie? Because I think the first movie was, really good on its own and wrapped itself up quite nicely. But I don't know, because I was enjoying it. I was like, I'm okay with having a second movie. Some of the atmosphere and some of the tension in this was like really well done. I feel like the dream sequences were really interesting and really fascinating, and like, had a lot of like some of the menacing scenes that I really enjoyed in this. And even the way that it was shot, where you can kind of clearly tell what was a dream, what wasn't a dream, was like really well done. And it just had like a creepiness to it, especially when you're seeing how some of the like young boys came to their demise. It was like, it felt very, I wouldn't even say brutal, because I don't think we saw like a lot of the brutality behind it, but it felt like really like raw and unfiltered, and just genuinely creepy. Overall, it was a bit slow at times in certain places. I think it kind of maybe dwelled on certain things a little bit too long, or like maybe like we spent a little bit too much time in certain moments. I do like how it carried on from the first movie. I do like sort of kind of like where the characters were. I do like Finn in this, whilst he wasn't the main character in this particular movie, but just kind of how they carried his trauma over, how that changed him in this particular movie, and like how that started to kind of make him a little bit more like his father, who he wasn't a fan of in the first movie. I think they handled that, really, really well. I'm really struggling to remember like key moments of this movie, but I think overall my feelings to it are more positive. Again, like on the scale of like, did it need to be made or not? Maybe not. I'm not sure, but I feel like it does a fine enough job from kind of like keeping the sort of the franchise a little bit fresh, adding a different element to it, adding a little bit more of a supernatural element to it, and really kind of carrying on some of the same feels that the first movie gave you in terms of like the atmosphere and like the feeling of the grabber, and how like menacing he was, and how threatening he was in certain situations. So yeah, I think overall quite positive on this.
So somebody asked earlier, why did they have to make a sequel? And the answer is that the original made 10 times its budget, so there had to be a sequel. And I think I think the original movie already was straining under being an adaptation of a Stephen King short story, where the basic idea of you are being held hostage in this basement, and there's this phone through which you can talk to the killer's previous victims. It's a really cool idea for a short story, but expanding that to a whole movie is already difficult. I think the original movie struggled with taking that to interesting places for 2 hours. Making a sequel makes that problem worse. And that is why I think they switched to going all in on Gwen's psychic visions and expanding the backstory and expanding the grabber's backstory and tying that to the mom and all of that. As I was watching it, there were a lot of scenes and moments in there where I thought, this is quite good. This looks good. This is well acted. And I'm struggling to get excited about it, because I think it really has some serious problems about how it unveils its mystery, and about how characters act and what they achieve and what they're about and who the main character is and all of that. All of which I think is really not thought through. And that is why I think as a story, it struggles. I'm not going so far as to say it's bad, because I can see lots of moments and visuals and ideas and scenes that are quite well done. But I was struggling to get really invested, because I think as a story, it's got gaps in it, and it's held back by some not optimal choices. That is why I walked away kind of being frustrated and not really having enjoyed myself. Let's talk about it.
Okay. So first question. So in the first movie, the phone kind of had like it had limited use when it comes to like what it could do in the film. Whereas this one, it seems like they expanded on it in terms of like its new powers. Do you think the sequel justified its continued existence and obviously its new functionality?
See, I don't think it did. There doesn't seem to be a huge purpose to it, like in terms of like why it exists and what impact it has on people. So I think the big, really big problem I have, and that ties to how the phones work, is that it's basically the main characters just following a trail, and information is given to them, and a lot of the time it's given to them through the phone. Like the original conversation between Gwen and the mom, or between Finn and the boys, and Gwen and the boys, and Finn and the grabber, like all of these happen through the phone. I just had a hard time kind of seeing a point in all of that, right? Because I think the entire way in which the mystery unfolds is just information being given to the main character. And I think Gwen is very clearly the main character in this, and Finn is kind of the main supporting character. And both of them don't do very much. They kind of just keep answering the phone, and then they're given information, and then they react to it, and then they're given more information over the phone. You know what I mean? Like I think that is really the big problem here, and that all hangs together with this central conceit of the black phone, which is this idea that it's a conduit to the dead. First of all, like this movie did not have to give like a clear cosmology of why this is. Like in the original movie, it wasn't even a real phone, in the sense that Finn was the only one who was hearing the voices, and I'm not even sure if it was actually there for other characters. I think it was, right? But like it was very much just like a creepy image that puts you in the position of talking to your abuser's previous victims, right? Like that was kind of the conceit. And here we're trying to build on it, but I don't think we're building it in a direction where interesting things happen, which I think is kind of the overall problem I have with this movie.
I think the reason why, for me, I think they did expand it in terms of like the functionality of the film. But I think the reason why they did that was because they tried to kind of like deepen the mythology surrounding the ghosts, and obviously the tragedy as well behind it. Because obviously at first we did know that these were like past victims, but we didn't kind of like we didn't really feel it in a way because Finn was the only human representation of it. I don't even remember in the first film if there was any like flashbacks or anything, or if we saw any like ghosts of the kids. Maybe I think Finn did maybe see one of the ghosts, like one of the ghosts of the kids I was talking to. I'm not too sure. I don't remember. But I think with this one, we kind of like felt it more, and we understood the severity of what the grabber was doing, and how bad it was, and obviously how evil his acts were. In terms of if it was necessary and if it worked, I think for me it was, yeah, I do believe it worked. In terms of like, I'm just still on the point of it wasn't necessary, but it still worked. So that's why I'm not angry at what I watched. I'm not angry with them creating a new one, but I'm starting to understand more that this grabber guy, he was like truly evil. I understood he was evil in the first movie, but this one he's been doing this for time. Like we understood the severity of this character. Like this has been going on for years and years, and even links to Finn's family, obviously with his mother and that. So I was like, damn, like there is a link. Do you think the link was a good link, by the way? Do you think, or was just something that they just added to the story? Like I think Daniel, you kind of mentioned sometimes like people just kind of like add stuff to the story because not because it works well or because it was necessary, but because it's just Hollywood in a way, if you get what I'm trying to say. Do you think that was like one of those moments as well with this one?
So Hollywood has a tendency to think family is really important, in the sense that everybody is connected to each other, and who your parents were is the most important thing, and all of that. And having the mom, I'm not sure what role she played in the original movie. I think it was just said that she's dead, right? Or that she had killed herself. And I think that was implied to have to do with the father being abusive, right? To everybody in the family. I think. I watched the movie a week ago and I don't remember very much of it. But I think that's more or less what it was.
I think they did allude to the mother, or like the father not believing in the mother, and like the dreams that she was having and stuff like that. They like alluded to her having some type of like psychic connection. So I think this just kind of rounds off like that story in terms of how it relates to the grabber and how it relates to, you know, what happened to Finn and all the boys that kind of came before it. So in a sense, kind of like answer the question of does it work to have it related to her? It did feel cheap a little bit, but in the sense of if we're bringing, because like there was like clearly a link between the daughter and the mother, and like, you know, they had similar powers and like they were able to kind of like see similar things. in the sense of like linking that and like bringing it full circle, I can understand why they would go with it in the direction that they chose to go with, even though I think it like cheapens it a little bit.
I just don't think it adds very much. Like, I don't think the grabber is made more interesting or any character is made more interesting because they knew each other 30 years ago or 20 years ago, whenever it was.
I think it makes the scene with their father, with Finn's father, and then when he's like come to get them and he's trying to get them to go home. I think it adds a little bit to that scene. It adds a little bit more weight, adds a little bit more emotion to that. Even though I think it's kind of just like chucked in there. I don't think it's like really woven that well into the story as a whole. But where it adds a little bit more of sort of a weight is just in that particular moment, because then it ties into like how he treated his kids, how much he believes in, what was actually going on, his like idea, and like it kind of actually feeds into like him staying and him like helping against the threat, and actually him putting himself in harm's way by going into the water and stuff like that. It kind of added that level of resolve to him, whereas like in the first movie he was like a bit of a absent father, and like in this one he's kind of trying to recover. He's like a recovering alcoholic but isn't really doing too much, and is still kind of not really believing or not wanting to believe in sort of what the kids are telling him. So in that sense, yes. As a whole, no, I would say.
Yeah, I don't know. It just seems so. Like, one of my problems with the story is that a lot of it is just based on coincidence. And the mom having found out about the grabber and having known him when he got started as the serial killer in the camp, that is pure coincidence. Like, I don't think the fact that he abducted Finn 20 years later had something to do with knowing the mom at a younger age, right? I think that's pure coincidence, right? So I don't think it adds any meaning necessarily, because pretty much everything that happens, every major connection or every major step of this is a coincidence. Like, it is also a coincidence that the guy who runs the camp just remembers the mom 20 years later, even though he says, like, a lot of counselors come through his camp and he's been doing this for decades and he's probably known hundreds of thousands of them, but he remembers this one. And he happens to remember exactly the details that Finn and Gwen need to move on to the next step in the quest. You know what I mean?
I mean, to defend it, if there was like significant things that happened around that camp and around the people that were involved in that camp, would you not still have like some type of recollection of it? Like that would stand out a little bit more than the others, because like these are the camps where boys were going missing, or like boys were being murdered and there wasn't an answer to it, so it kind of like haunts you a little bit and you kind of remember it a
Yeah.
little bit more.
Yeah, you might remember the counselors who were there during the years when boys kept disappearing. But still, the rest of it is still coincidence, right? The fact that there's a connection between like Finn and Gwen's family and the grabber, that has nothing to do with the events of the first movie, right?
No, not at all. Not at all. Like on that front, yeah, I can tell that's probably a little bit of coincidence, yeah, and doesn't really tie in to the first movie. But is it not part of like the sequel to kind of like expand on the lore and expand on sort of like the universe? And I understand what you're saying, but I don't feel like I'm mad at it. I don't feel like I'm mad at the movie for doing it, because it's trying to add new layers to it. It's trying to add different something, and it's not the first movie that I've seen do this. It's not the first TV show or like movie that I've seen where you get a little bit more information and you like see the connection. You kind of like start to like jot the two, and it's like not the most improbable thing that could potentially happen, because again, the whole grabbers MO is targeting these young boys, and like some of these Christian camps are kind of like ripe for the type of victims that you would want. So you kind of like put yourself in those situations.
Does anything about the grabber become more interesting after what we learn in this movie? Because he's kind of like a mystery in the first one, right? Like, there's the weird mask and the black balloons and the black van, and he doesn't do very much, right? He's just the kidnapper. And really, what's important in the first movie is Finn's experience and his experience talking to the ghosts, right? That's kind of the important part. And here we expand on his backstory, and here we expand on who he is. And does he get more interesting?
I feel like he gets a little bit more sinister. Is the word I'm probably looking for. I feel like adds like a little bit more of a sinister tone to what he has been doing, and knowing that he had been doing it for so long, and knowing that there are kind of more bodies out there. I don't know. It,
Yeah.
it just added like a little bit more of like a threat level to him as a character.
But we knew that there were other victims. We knew we had been doing this for a long time. I think in the first movie it's implied that they didn't find all of them and they don't know for how long he's been doing this. So my bottom line here is like they expand the lore, but I don't feel like I think there's a convergence of several different issues. One of them is that the stuff they add to the lore I don't think is all that interesting. Like in the first one, as just a stand-in for the evil child abductor and serial killer, that was really effective, right? That, like the mask is a striking image. It doesn't mean anything, but it's a striking image, and he's a menacing presence and all of that, right? And there he was like a metaphor for an abusive home, right? Because he does and says things that are reminiscent of an abusive parent, right? Like when he kills his brother because he discovers Finn in the basement, he blames Finn for having made him do this, right? Stuff like this, right? And that mirrors the father as well. The father who acts in a similar way at home because he's an abusive parent. That was kind of the deal of the first movie, right? And here he just killed more children, and while pretending to be a camp counselor. And I'm not sure it adds very much to that. In addition to that, the entire plot hinges on coincidence, like we mentioned. And Gwen is the main character, but she has no agency. She never really does anything. Like she does not really drive the investigation. She does not really have like a journey of her own. She does not grow or overcome a big hurdle. She kind of just receives these visions, and that leads them to follow the breadcrumbs and find things out. But I didn't feel like there was very much going on with her that made her interesting. And Finn is kind of just a supporting character, which is fine, right? Like he didn't have to be the protagonist of this one. And then, in addition, the movie starts about half an hour too early. I think this movie should have started when they arrive at the camp. And they basically just say, we've been getting visions and they've led us here. And then, based on what questions they ask and where they go and what they try to find out, you learn the thing about the mother and the fact that they think that there were more murders that the grabber is responsible for and all of that, right? I think the movie kind of spins its wheels for half an hour in the beginning, everything that happens at the school that doesn't really add very much. So put all of these together, and I think we have just a little bit of an empty suit of a movie where it tries to do stuff, but I don't think it adds like it really comes together. And I think what's missing is like a big idea, some kind of thing that drives the entire thing. And I think we've kind of touched on this, which is this is an obligatory sequel because the first movie made so much money, but it's based on a short story that was already pushed beyond its limits in the first movie. So what do we do now? We kind of take ingredients from other horror movies, right? So we have the lakeside camp, we have the psychic who gets visions from the past, we have the serial killer who kind of stalks your dreams. Like these are all like at this point we've referenced Friday the 13th,
Nightmare on Elm Street.
Nightmare on Elm Street, right? Like for about 5 minutes, this is a Nightmare on Elm Street ripoff, and then it forgets that, and he's just an invisible monster that can be punched. So I think that's kind of where this movie came from, and that's how it feels like to me. Which is this movie didn't start with, "Hey, let's take the idea of the grabber to the next level," or let's push the story forward, or let's talk about what happens to somebody who survives this kind of serial killer or this kind of abduction or something like that, right? I think that central idea was missing, so we just started filling in blanks and pushing back the boundaries, but we didn't really have a direction, and we didn't really have a big idea of where we were going towards. And because the movie doesn't really go towards something other than they fight the grabber in the end, that is, I think, why this movie feels so aimless and so empty in the middle.
I hear what you're saying. I think their expansion was mainly to do with the grabber from being like a personal human monster to a more broader inherited evil. And also for them, it was going to be, it's kind of like what they were portraying is unfinished business, right? So you could argue that that is the selling point, because like I'm saying, the grabber was such a monstrous character in the beginning, and it's similar with like what's that character, Jason's character, right? Where at first you think he's human, but then the more movies that come out, he starts to kind of like push the boundaries of being human and enters more in the whole supernatural space. And I think that's what it's similar with obviously the grabber's character, where at first you think he's human, but then now the second movie is kind of like push him beyond the bounds of actually being human and more into that, like I said, inherited evil type of thing.
But that just means they're repeating the mistake from another movie series from 40 years ago.
Was Jason a flop?
I mean, it made a bunch of money, but like it's not like Jason Voorhees is that interesting a character, and or the movies really go somewhere. Like they keep trying to recapture the magic of the early ones, and it's kind of always the same trick again. And every time they try to add to it, it doesn't quite work. So I've been very negative about this movie so far, and I didn't hate it that much. But I do think this is like the big problem that, for instance, Gwen does not have a character arc, right? She just kind of receives information and reacts to it, but she's not really working towards something like in a meaningful way, like in the way that would constitute a character arc, for instance. What's really weird is that everybody gets a big lecture except her. So there's two instances in this where a character gets lectured in a way that really helps them grow. First time, it's the camp manager, Miguel, I think it is, gives a pep talk to Finn. Remember exactly what it was about. And then the second time, Gwen confronts her father and essentially forces him to face facts, right? At no point does Gwen have growing to do. It's kind of the problem. Like, these are normally things you would give to the protagonist so that they can learn a big lesson and step up or overcome some big hurdle or some big shortcoming. And we do it twice in this movie, and it goes towards supporting characters. Why are they learning lessons? You know what I mean? Like, why is not Gwen learning lessons?
I think the biggest sin was the father, just because of like how absent he is for the majority of the movie. So it didn't quite need to be there. But I do agree with you that there isn't that like centerpiece of the movie that really kind of like ties the narrative together in any aspect, like whether it's the protagonist's journey or whether it's really like a real central theme for the movie. I kind of feel like we're like a little bit similar, where I'm probably a little bit more positive than you are overall, because like a lot of those things are lacking, but it's still a good, enjoyable like viewing experience despite that. And I actually think they probably missed a big trick, because I know you were saying that there probably wasn't much we could have got from Finn's character in this particular movie, but I actually think that there was like a lot more to explore in his character. And I think one of the disappointing things is that at the start of the movie is that because of his fear, he's kind of like lashing out at other people and trying to overcompensate on the trauma that he's experienced by like, you know, really like getting into fights, bloodying people up and stuff like that. And in the end, he kind of does similar to the grabber, and he has that realization moment of, or like he has that moment where he's like fully lets out his emotions and fully like, you know, really speaks about like how he actually feels when is confronting both her father and Finn in that particular scene, which I think is a really, really good scene. But I feel like that's where there could have been a real central like narrative in this particular movie, and someone like Gwen could have just been a supporting character and like supported in his journey and his development, whilst we kind of like saw it through the lens of like him as a main character. Yeah, hey, movie went a different direction.
Well, I'm totally fine with Gwen being the main character, but then give her a story, right? Which is kind of missing. Just as one example of what you could have done with Finn, the almost last scene of the first movie is that throughout the movie he gets called Finney. As he comes back to school from having survived the ordeal of the kidnapping, somebody calls him Finney and he corrects them to call him Finn, and they respect it. Kind of indicating growth and kind of indicating having grown up and having lost innocence. You know what I mean? Like, that seems to be kind of the takeaway at the very end. That seems missing here. Like, people still call him Finney, and he still doesn't like it. But that's kind of it, right? Like, am I missing something?
What did the grapper call him? Wasn't it Finney as well?
I think so, yeah. But other people call him Finney too.
Yeah, but I assumed when he corrected him was because obviously it links to trauma. I understand that he was called that before, most likely, but I'm assuming afterwards, obviously, because now it's different. And obviously, I'm sure all he could think of was a grabber when he's been called Finney. So I'm sure he tried to separate himself from that, is what I'm assuming.
Yeah, maybe I could took it as like growing up and being a different person after having had these experiences. And it feels like this resets the clock a little bit, or it doesn't, at least it doesn't do anything with it.
I see what you're saying. So not to divert to what you were saying, just a quick thought, question in a way. Do you guys feel like the grabber should have stayed as a hallucination? Would that have been more interesting? Because I remember when Finney was seeing him a couple of times, and I was like, okay, that could be interesting. Because at first I thought maybe it's just his mind playing tricks on him, but even though the sister was having dreams, I'm like, okay, maybe it's a thing where Finney kind of like not transforms into the grabber, but it's a thing where he becomes unstable, and that kind of the storyline kind of revolves around him as well in that sense, where the grabber isn't really like I said, an inherited evil, but he's more now kind of like stuck in Finn's mind, where he's like ingrained in his mind, and now that's kind of like slowly transforming him into something where he's now in danger. I don't know, but I'm just kind of trying to think maybe they didn't have to kind of go that route with the grabber still being the central threat rather than it kind of like revolving around Finney.
I don't even know that the grabber had to be in this. Just expand on the idea of the phones and, I don't know, discover other victims or other killers or other hidden secrets in this town or whatever it might be, right? I'm not opposed to, you're not even opposed to the camp setting, which I think is like, it's an iconic horror movie setting, and it's like it's a remote location, and it has to do with like innocence because you go there as a child and you're kind of trusting yourself or you're trusting your children to these complete strangers, and then horrible things happen. There's a reason for why that's such an iconic setting for slasher movies. I just didn't feel like there was any intention here at all. Speaking of things with not much intention that kind of take up a lot of time, the idea of Christianity comes up over and over again in this, right? So this is a Christian camp, and the father, who used to be an abuser and is now recovering, doesn't like religion, right? He doesn't like his children going to a Christian camp. These two older counselors, Kenneth and Barbara, right? They hate Gwen, calling her a demon child because she has these visions, which kind of has connotations of victim blaming, right? Because Gwen, so first of all, it's kind of blaming the person who wants to talk about problems for the problems, right? So that's one thing. That is one thing that kind of very traditional communities have a tendency of doing. Instead of confronting a problem, you blame the person who wants to draw attention to it, right? That is something that happens. And also, they are blaming her as being satanic when she's just seeing the victims or seeing the evil thing. So, which is a very backwards way of doing it, but it feels kind of authentic to, like, this is how that kind of person would do it. And then we have like one of the least subtle symbolisms was when Armando, I got confused earlier, where Armando is the camp manager, and he has this big coming clean moment. There's a giant cross, glowing cross in the background, and it fills up more of the space than he does. Just like any thoughts on this? Like in terms of what it means, what it has to do with the story, why it's there, why it keeps coming back. And then there's another one where just taking inventory here of all the mentions, right? At one point, Mustang, I think, tries to get Kenneth and Barbara to help with searching the lake for the boys, and Barbara kind of rejects the idea. And then Mustang says, "Oh, that's very Christian of you." Or a proper Christian or a real Christian would help, or something like that, indicating that the most pious person in the cast is not acting like a real Christian. You know what I mean? So, any ideas what it means, how it fits into the movie, why it's there? What did you think as it kept coming up in the movie?
I didn't necessarily have an issue with it until it felt like witchcraft went in the end, which was a bit weird. The reason why I say that is because the sisters like vision and stuff wasn't rooted in Christianity. I remember there was a time where she had like these cards. I forgot what cards it was, but her kind of like crush gifted her with these cards.
That was a Catholic thing.
Was that a Catholic
I
thing?
think so, right? I believe so.
I thought they were like the cards that like a lot of these psychics use when they tell like I don't know what it's called, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't a Catholic thing. It was like these two sort of cards because it links. It's even like her, her student, like the students were calling her a witch, and then that's when he came with the cards and gifted it to her. But I'm sure it wasn't a Catholic thing.
I'm confused a bit now. I think Ernesto is it, right? Who's trying to get with Gwen, right? I think he says his mom would like it because she's really hardcore Catholic.
Yeah. But what he gifted her,
I don't know if that's just something he's saying. I'm not sure now, but like that, like Gwen is into like spiritualism stuff because she wants to understand her visions, and then Ernesto gives her this deck of cards, which is not tarot but similar. And I think it's like a traditional Mexican thing, which is linked to Catholicism, or at least similar, or at least I don't know, part of some tradition. I don't know exactly. But but that happens early in the movie, right? And then when we get to the camp, that's when they really hit you with the not at all subtle symbolism.
Yeah, but that's the thing is I don't understand why, because Christianity was never a thing in the franchise in the first film. So in the second film, I was trying to understand what is the purpose for it. Did they just add it because what they're dealing with is demonic, or was there an actual purpose behind obviously the installation of Christianity? Like, I'm all for seeing Christian stuff in movies. I'm Christian myself. However, there has to be a purpose behind it. And what I saw was, okay, so spiritualism is what defeats the evil, not Christianity in a sense. 'Cause I didn't see. I'm not saying I was supposed to. I was low key expecting some sort of exorcism. We just saw stuff of Christianity being shown, but it wasn't really utilized at all. Well, there was a scene where Gwen was reciting one of the scriptures,
But it was to show off against Barbara, right? Because she quotes scripture at Gwen, and so Gwen counters to embarrass her because she knows the scripture better than Barbara does.
yeah. But she also does use it against Grabber as well.
Okay, yeah, I don't remember that one, but yeah, like it shows up, right? And which is the idea that the institutional religion in this is not the real one, right?
Mhm.
Because this is like this camp is formally a Christian thing, and they wear like that identity on their sleeves, but they're not great people. And to the extent that they are, like Mustang and Armando, they seem to be just good people because they're good people. Whereas the people who wear their religion on their sleeves are the ones who are useless and who are just in the way, which is specifically Barbara.
Yeah, and I thought it was going to lead into that where those strong in faith will be the ones that, have a better chance against the grabber, but it didn't at all. Well, kind of did, because obviously the fake Christians, they were the ones that were, hurt first. But they didn't lead into that really. So yeah, for me personally, I just think it was useless. Them showing like the Christianity itself in this was useless because it wasn't utilized. So I just think it was just put in there just for, because it revolves around a supernatural, this supernatural subject. So,
But it's not just a mention, right? Like it keeps it like it's constantly. So that's kind of why, like, but that's kind of what it makes feel even more aimless. This just adds to the reasons of why this doesn't have any idea where it's going. This feels right, like making the Christians hypocrites and invoking the idea of religiosity and tradition and scripture and all of that. It's there, but it doesn't add up to a bigger whole. Is the problem, and I don't think it does in the same way that expanding on the grabber's law doesn't, expanding on the psychic visions doesn't. It's kind of my big problem with it. And definitely we've gone on over the negatives for a long time now, but I think the good parts of this movie are just individual scenes, right? So for instance, when Finn is in the phone booth and the three dead boys are talking, like appearing to him, and they're talking to him through the phone, and you can see how they died because of their injuries. That's a really cool scene. Or the dreams when Gwen is in the dorm and she has like the grabber starts reaching out to her psychically. That's all pretty cool. When the grabber attacks her and but he's invisible, and so she's just floating in the air in the kitchen, and and they're kind of like dragging her towards the furnace, and everybody is scrambling to save her, and all of like not really knowing what's going on. Like those are all very cool images, and I think if people like this movie, I think it's probably because of that. But my big problem was it wasn't really building towards something where I say, okay, this is satisfying in the end. Because in the end, he's just invisible and they just kill him by punching him. And they trap him under the ice, I think, or I don't remember how exactly they kill him, but they kill him not in some way that culminates their stories. It's just they defeat the bad guy in a fight. That's kind of it.
but I think it had a bit more than individual scenes. 'Cause I've even mentioned this before in terms of like the dreams, which how that goes into like the grabber's past. I found that pretty interesting and engaging as well. I just liked it, the dreams and how that was used to go into their history with the link between obviously the grabber and the family. I think that just added a bit more than individual moments for me personally.
I also feel like as well is, I know I mentioned about the pacing in my like initial review, but I don't know. Sometimes I appreciate when a movie takes time to actually spend time with the characters and actually like get into the characters' thoughts and like what their feelings are, and like just like general conversations that they're like having in that moment, just so we can actually know the character. And I don't think it was like executed the best in this movie. I don't think it's like the best depiction of how you get the audience into understanding the character and into the psyche. But there were like just like moments where just like you kind of felt like the chemistry between Gwen and Finn, and you kind of like really felt like you were getting like just like a better understanding as to like who they were, like what they were feeling and stuff like that. Which again, I appreciate. Like again, in the movie, not done the best, or not the best example of it, but done well enough where I appreciate what they were trying to do in those moments.
Yeah, I think as people, they were well realized. Like as siblings, they cared for each other and they seemed to be real. And every time she had one of these visions that caused her to sleepwalk, Finn was there to help her. And he was freaked out by it, but he just did what he could to help. And like these little touches, these little details, I think worked just fine. The question is that enough?
Probably not. Like, probably not. And I think the reason why I feel like I'm overall positive on the movie is that, part of it is those little things that work really well. Part of it's the imagery, like you said. I don't know if you mentioned it, but like, when the boys were like floating to the surface and like scratching like a letter onto the ice and stuff like that. Like those are like quite chilling. And when you get like some of the sequences where you can kind of see the grabber when he was at the camp and he's kind of like stalking particular boys and stuff like that. I think those type of elements also make it enjoyable. I don't think it's like the worst story in the world. I think it's like serviceable enough whilst there's like still leaving a lot on the table, like and not having enough sort of meat and bones on the actual sort of narrative that they wanted to tell. But it was still kind of like overall, it's like it's almost like good but not great in a lot of places, which then makes it just an enjoyable like movie experience without it hitting the heights that it could have.
The reason I'm focusing so much on the negatives is that I don't think this is bad. Like this looks okay. The characters are likable enough. They're alive enough and well rounded enough. But I just felt frustrated watching it. I wanted to understand my reaction to it because much like the first movie, I just could not latch onto it. I just could not get into it, and I couldn't point to any one specific thing. Like there's not. I don't think there's really major plot holes or like breaks in logic or characters doing stupid things or something like that. Right, where you can say, okay, this is just outright wrong. But I just could not get excited about it. I was simply not on board with the movie. And I wanted to understand why I had this reaction. I seem to be pretty alone in this by the sounds of it. I think this is making decent enough money. I think this made 42 million in the first weekend, which is not quite enough yet, and we'll see how the next weekend goes. But that's not a flop, right? Like it's not being ignored by audiences. I think its scores are relatively good. Let me see. 74% on Rotten Tomatoes for critics. So this is broadly, people are saying this is fine. That's just at odds with my experience. And I don't know, like that's why I was like kicking the tires so much and trying to find out, okay, does Gwen actually have a character arc? Is this movie actually about something? Does it have a theme? Does it do interesting things by expanding the lore? Does it do interesting things by creating this connection between Finn's and Gwen's family and the grabber? And with all of those, I'm coming up empty. I'm coming up negative. And I feel like I'm the only one.
I don't feel like you're the only one. Because like I recognize the flaws that you're pointing out in the movie. So I'm not saying that you're like you're delusional and like we're not seeing what you're seeing as flaws. But I feel like when if you're kind of like starting at a mark out of 10 for this movie, is that those things don't bring the scores down as much for myself anyways as it does for you on your kind of like viewing, and I'll say for this particular movie, because in a different movie under different circumstances I think maybe I'm a little bit more critical and maybe I'm a little bit more harsh. Maybe there's like a bias from liking the first movie so much that I can excuse it because I have a decent connection to the franchise. But I don't think you're wrong. I don't think you're crazy in pointing out some of the flaws because it's clearly there and there's a lot missing from the story. But I think it's just how much do you let that impact your overall like experience of like enjoying the movie. And I think for myself it doesn't bring it down as much as it does for probably you on your side.
I think for me, there's just not as much to replace it because them uncovering all of this lore and peeling back the mystery and learning more about the grabber is the movie. It's not like it's window dressing, but we are really there to watch half a dozen out there kills, right? Like there's one or two of those, but not a lot, right? Like you cannot hang the, like this is not a standard slasher movie, which it's not supposed to be. It's not trying to be, right? The first one wasn't a slasher either, but it's kind of got the setting of one. And so you could have made a movie in which like the grabber just kills a bunch of kids, right? In increasingly gruesome ways, right? You could have. And then I would have said, okay, maybe the lore doesn't need to be that interesting because the effort goes into the kills, for example. But I just can't point to something where I can say, okay, this is where the thought and creativity and effort went into. Because it's clearly supposed to go into the lore and expanding the mythology. And that fell flat for me. All right, shall we wrap it up? Any last words about Black Phone 2?
I enjoyed it. Thought it was cool. Just didn't think there needed to be a second one. But I'm not mad that there's a second one. Yeah, it's not really much to add. Individual performance, I enjoyed. It seems like the way that it ended, they're setting up for a third installment. Who knows? But we'll see. I will give this one I might say borderline 7, but I'm gonna give it a strong 6.5 out of 10.
Overall, it's okay. Could have been better in so many places. To be fair, it's kind of forgettable. It's kind of forgettable. It's like really inoffensive in the sense that you can watch it and you won't hate what you're watching. You won't hate your experience watching it. Probably don't need to go and see this one in the cinema. I would say there isn't really enough there to kind of feel like I would ever go back to this movie at all. And it just doesn't have like the same appeal. I don't know if you can hear the fireworks going off because they're pretty loud. But
I thought somebody was like building a table in the other room or something.
oh no, that is fireworks. That is just like fireworks going off at the moment. I think overall, I'll give it a. I think actually we're gonna match Jonathan. I'm gonna go 6.5 out of 10 as well. I was gonna give it a 7, but I don't think I can give it as high as a 7 for this movie. So I think we'll go 6.5 out of 10.
The more I think about this, like I was actually trying to go into this conversation, trying to change my mind because I don't want to hate this movie. And I think it's a terrible movie. I think it's well acted. Like moment to moment, it's shot decently well. Like it's a functional movie. It's not awful. I just felt empty having watched it. And the more we talk about it, the more I'm kind of convinced that this is like an obligatory sequel where they worked backwards from, oh, we have to make another one because the first one made money. And that's just how movies are made. So what do we do? And so we try a bunch of stuff. And I think they missed with all of them. In my like, or most of them, like the big ticket items, like expanding the lore and talking about giving the grabber a background story and expanding on the psychic visions in which victims kind of find solace in each other across time and space and all of that is potentially something you could make a movie out of, but I just don't feel like it landed because I think it was missing an idea. They didn't come up with like a big idea to build the movie around. They kind of had like 3 or 4 half-baked ideas that they tried to make work, and at least for me it didn't get there. And because that is so central to what Gwen's story specifically is about, I just could not get into it. So that's a 5 out of 8. It's okay, it's not terrible, it's watchable, but it's unsatisfying.
Alright, guys. You've heard it here first. Thank you very much for tuning into today's semi debate discussion.
If you reach this part of the episode, as always, we appreciate your support. We appreciate you working with us and giving us a play. And as always, if you like this episode and you enjoyed our discussion today, you should probably tell a friend. And if you hated everything and you thought we were chatting a bunch of nonsense, then you probably shouldn't fall asleep tonight. We are the Eye of the Storm podcast.
Alright, guys. Thank you very much, and we'll catch you next time. Au revoir.
Ciao.
Bye bye.